The ship came out of the light like a silver needle. Ambassador Yerelketh watched from the observation deck as the blue marble called Earth grew larger in the viewport. He had done this many times before, 47 times to be exact. 47 new species had been welcomed into the Galactic Council under his guidance. This would be the 48th. Yerelketh was a Thessary, a tall creature with skin like polished stone and eyes that glowed with soft purple light. His people had been part of the Council for 6,000 years. They understood how the galaxy worked. Young species discovered fire. They built machines. They reached for the stars. And then the Council found them and showed them their place in the grand order of things. It was a simple system. It had worked for millennia. The human orbital station floated ahead of them. It was called Unity, a name that Yerelketh found amusing. The station was impressive for such a young species. Clean lines, efficient design, and armed with weapons that showed humans understood the dangers of space. But it was still primitive compared to Council technology. The humans had only discovered faster-than-light travel 30 years ago. They were babies in a galaxy full of ancient civilizations. Behind Yerelketh stood delegates from 12 species. The Vorn, with their many arms and calculating minds. The Kalashi, whose fur changed color with their moods. The Drexi, who communicated through chemical signals that smelled like flowers. All of them veterans of first contact. All of them certain of the outcome. The Council offered wonderful things to new species. Technology that could cure diseases and extend lifespans. Maps of trade routes that crossed the galaxy. Protection from the threats that lurked in the outer rim, where pirates and worse things waited for easy prey. In exchange, the new species simply had to sign the Concord Treaty. They had to make small sacrifices of territory and independence for the greater good. Every species said yes. How could they not? The alternative was to struggle alone in a hostile universe. The shuttle docked with a soft thump. Yerelketh straightened his ceremonial robes and led his delegation into the human station. They were met by a small group of humans. Yerelketh studied them carefully. They were soft creatures, fragile-looking, with no claws or scales or natural armor. Their eyes held emotions that were easy to read. Fear would have been normal. Wonder would have been expected. But Yerelketh saw neither. He saw curiosity, and something else. Something that looked almost like suspicion. At the front of the human group stood a woman with dark skin and hair streaked with gray. She wore a simple uniform, dark blue with silver trim. Her name was Amara Okonkwo, and she was the Secretary General of the United Earth Government. Ambassador Yerelketh, she said, her voice calm and steady. Welcome to Unity Station. We are honored by your visit. Yerelketh spread his arms in the traditional gesture of peace. The honor is ours, Secretary General. The Council has watched humanity's progress with great interest. You have achieved much in a short time. We are a determined people, Okonkwo replied. Her smile was polite, but did not reach her eyes. They moved to a conference room that had been prepared for the meeting. The human chairs were too small for some of the delegates, but adjustments had been made. Yerelketh appreciated the effort. These humans paid attention to details. For 3 hours, the Council delegates presented their offer. They showed videos of Council worlds, beautiful and prosperous. They explained the benefits of membership. Technology that would push humanity forward by centuries. Safety from the dangers that lurked in the dark spaces between stars. The humans listened. They took notes. They asked questions. Many questions. Yerelketh felt the first hint of unease when Okonkwo asked about the territorial clauses. Section 7 states that member species must contribute territory for Council facilities, she said, reading from a tablet. What kind of facilities, and how much territory? Standard infrastructure, Uralketh replied smoothly. Communication relays, defense stations. The amount varies based on strategic needs. Whose needs? Ours or the Council's? The Vorn delegate shifted uncomfortably. The Kalashi's fur flickered to a worried shade of yellow. Okonkwo continued. Section 12 mentions binding arbitration for disputes. Who serves as arbiters? Experienced and impartial. Appointed by whom? And has any new species ever won an arbitration against an established council member? Silence fell over the room. Uralketh felt something cold crawl up his spine. In 3,000 years, no species had ever asked that question during first contact. A younger human spoke up. He was a thin man with sharp eyes, introduced earlier as a historian named Dr. James Adebayo. We've studied the records you provided, he said. Very thorough records. We noticed patterns. Patterns? Uralketh kept his voice neutral. Species that join the council thrive for a century or two. Then disputes arise. Territory is lost through arbitration. Cultural practices are modified for harmonization. Within 500 years, most species have lost significant autonomy. He paused. 18 species that joined no longer exist as distinct cultures. They were absorbed completely. Uralketh looked at his fellow delegates, but none of them would meet his eyes. Secretary General Okonkwo leaned forward. Ambassador, we are not saying no. We are saying we need time. 6 months to study the treaty fully, to understand what we would be agreeing to. 6 months. Uralketh nodded slowly. It was unusual, but not unreasonable. The humans were careful. That was understandable. They would study the treaty, see its benefits, and accept. They always did. 6 months is acceptable, he said. We will return for your answer. As they walked back to their shuttle, the Kalashi delegate moved close to Uralketh. Her fur was still that worried yellow. They know, she whispered. They see what the treaty really means. Uralketh said nothing. He watched the human delegation through the window as the shuttle pulled away. Secretary General Okonkwo stood at the viewport, watching them leave. Her face was unreadable. For the first time in 47 first contacts, Uralketh felt uncertain. These humans were not like the others. They asked questions that should not be asked. They looked at the gift and searched for the trap. But surely they would still say yes. What choice did they have? They were one small species in a vast galaxy. They needed the Council. Everyone needed the Council. 6 months later, Uralketh would learn how wrong he was. The Great Chamber of Nexus Prime was the largest structure in the known galaxy. Its dome stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath its ceiling. 10,000 seats rose in circles around the central speaking platform, filled with delegates from hundreds of species. Light poured through crystal windows, painting everything in shades of gold. This was where the Galactic Council made its decisions. This was where civilizations were shaped. High Arbiter Thesson sat in the tallest seat, looking down at the chamber with ancient eyes. He was Marathi, one of the founding species of the Council. His body was like a great serpent covered in silver scales, and his mind held memories that stretched back 12,000 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had guided countless young species into the Council's embrace. Today, he would welcome humanity. The chamber hummed with conversation as delegates waited for the human ship to arrive. Uralketh stood near the speaking platform, preparing for the ceremony. The treaty documents were ready. The celebration feast was prepared. Everything was in place. But Uralketh could not shake his worry. In 6 months, he had heard strange rumors about the humans. They had been busy during their deliberation period. They had reached out to species that had left the Council long ago. They had asked questions about old arbitration cases. They had studied history that most species had forgotten. The doors of the chamber opened. Silence fell like a wave. A single human walked in. He was not Secretary General Okonkwo. He was an older man, tall and straight-backed, with a face like carved stone. His hair was white, his eyes were gray, and he wore a simple military uniform decorated with medals. His name was Marcus Chen, and he was a former admiral of the human fleet. He walked to the speaking platform alone. No assistants or advisors. Just one man facing 10,000 aliens. High Arbiter Thesson leaned forward, his scales catching the light. "Ambassador Chen," he said, his voice filling the chamber through hidden speakers. "We welcome humanity to this historic moment. Are you prepared to sign the Concord Treaty and join the Galactic Council?" Marcus Chen looked up at the High Arbiter. His face showed no fear, no awe, no hesitation. "No," he said. The single word echoed through the chamber. For a moment, nothing happened. The delegates simply stared, unable to process what they had heard. Then the chaos began. Shouts erupted from every direction. Delegates jumped to their feet. The Vorn clicked their many limbs in agitation. The Kalashi turned colors so fast they seemed to vibrate. Even the ancient Marathi hissed in shock. High Arbiter Thesson raised one massive arm, and slowly, painfully, silence returned. "Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding," he said, his voice cold. "You are refusing the generous offer of the Galactic Council?" "There is no misunderstanding," Chen replied. "Humanity has studied your treaty carefully. We have reviewed the history of species that have joined the Council, and we have decided that membership is not in our interest." "Not in your interest?" a delegate shouted from the upper rows. "The Council offers technology, protection, prosperity. What more could you want?" Chen turned to face the voice. "We want to remain human." He reached into his uniform and pulled out a small device. With a tap, it projected a holographic display that filled the air above the platform. Numbers and names and dates appeared, glowing in the golden light. "These are the 47 species that have joined the Council in the past 3,000 years, Chen said. "All of them signed your treaty with hope and gratitude. All of them believed they were joining a partnership of equals." He tapped the device again. Some of the names turned red. 31 of these species have lost their homeworlds to arbitration disputes. The Council claimed these worlds were needed for facilities or defense or resource extraction. The native species were relocated elsewhere. Another tap. More names turned red. 18 of these species no longer exist as distinct cultures. Their languages are dead. Their traditions are forgotten. Their children are taught to be good Council citizens, not members of their own people. The chamber was silent now. Every eye watched the floating display. "You call this the Concord," Chen continued. "A word that means agreement, harmony. But there is no agreement when one side holds all the power. There is no harmony when diversity dies." He looked directly at High Arbiter Thesson. "You do not offer partnership. You offer absorption with extra steps." Thesson's scales rippled with barely contained anger. "You speak boldly for such a young species. Do you understand what you are rejecting? The galaxy is dangerous. Without Council protection, humanity will face threats you cannot imagine." "We understand the risks," Chen said. "We have looked at those threats, and we have looked at the Council. We have decided that we would rather face the dangers of freedom than accept the safety of surrender." He turned to address the entire chamber. "Humanity will not sign your treaty. We will not cede our territory. We will not submit to your arbitration. We will not change our culture to fit your harmonization programs." His voice rose, strong and clear. "We came to the stars to explore, to grow, to become more than we were, not to become less, not to disappear into your system like so many others before us." He switched off the holographic display and put the device back in his pocket. This is not an act of war. We do not wish to be your enemies. But we will be your equals, or we will be nothing to you at all. Marcus Chen walked toward the exit. 10,000 delegates watched him go, too stunned to speak. At the door, he paused and looked back. Humanity says no, he said, and that answer will not change. The doors closed behind him. In the great chamber, silence held for a long moment. Then High Arbiter Thesson spoke, his voice like breaking ice. Summon the Council of Elders. This species must be taught the consequences of refusal. But as the delegates began to move and whisper, Yerulketh noticed something strange. Here and there, among the thousands of faces, he saw expressions that were not angry or shocked. He saw admiration, and he saw hope. Something had changed in the great chamber today. The humans had spoken words that had never been spoken here before. They had said no. They had refused to kneel. And somewhere, in the hearts of species who had long ago forgotten what freedom felt like, a spark began to glow. The Council of Elders met in a room that few living beings had ever seen. It was deep beneath the surface of Nexus Prime, carved from black stone that absorbed all light. Only the soft glow of the elders themselves provided illumination. There were 7 of them, the oldest members of the oldest species. Together, they held more power than all the fleets in the galaxy. High Arbiter Thesson coiled his great body on the central platform and addressed his colleagues. The humans have made their choice, he said. They believe they can stand alone against the universe. They are wrong. We must show them their error. Elder Vorthax of the Drexy released a cloud of chemical signals that smelled like burning metal. It meant anger. War, she said. Crush them before they spread their poison to others. No. This came from Elder Keth, the oldest of the Kalashi. His fur had long ago faded to white, and his voice was barely a whisper. War would prove their point. Other species would see us as tyrants. We must be more clever. Thesson nodded slowly. We will not attack the humans. We will simply isolate them. Without access to the FTL corridors, their ships cannot travel efficiently between stars. Without our trade networks, their colonies will wither. Without our protection, the Outer Rim threats will find them. We will not destroy humanity. We will wait for them to beg us for help. The elders agreed. Orders went out across the galaxy. Council patrol ships moved to block human vessels from entering the mapped corridor routes. Trade stations were instructed to refuse service to human merchants. Diplomatic channels were closed. The blockade began. On Earth, Secretary General Okonkwo called an emergency meeting of the World Council. Representatives from every nation gathered in the Great Hall, their faces showing worry and fear. The Council has cut us off, she said. Our ships cannot use the FTL corridors. Our merchants have been turned away from every major station. We are alone. Voices rose in anger and panic. Some demanded that humanity reconsider. Perhaps they could negotiate better terms. Perhaps they had been too proud. Admiral Chen stood at the back of the room, silent and calm. He waited until the shouting died down, then walked to the front. We knew this would happen, he said. We planned for it. He activated the display screens that lined the walls. They showed star maps, ship designs, and technical data that made many of the representatives gasp. For 30 years, we have been developing our own method of faster-than-light travel, Chen explained. The Council uses corridor routes, fixed paths through space that their ships must follow. Our method is different. We fold space itself. We do not need their corridors. The room fell silent. Our ships can go anywhere, Chen continued. Any star, any system, any point in the galaxy. We are not limited to the paths they have mapped. We are free. A representative from the European Federation raised her hand. Why did we not use this technology before? Why did we even consider joining the council? Chen's expression was grim. Because this technology is new, because we were not sure it would work on a large scale, and because we hoped the council might truly offer partnership. He paused. They did not. So now we use what we have built. Within weeks, human ships began appearing at neutral stations throughout the galaxy. They folded space, vanished from one location, and appeared at another, without using the corridors. Council patrol ships could not catch them. They did not know where to look. Human merchants sold goods that the council had tried to cut off. They bought resources that humanity needed. They smiled politely at the confused station masters and went on their way. The blockade was failing. On Nexus Prime, High Arbiter Thesson received report after report of human ships appearing and disappearing like ghosts. His scales turned dark with fury. How is this possible? He demanded. No species has ever developed independent FTL travel. They should be trapped. They are not, Urelketh replied quietly. He had been watching the humans carefully since the refusal. He was beginning to understand them. They found another way. They always find another way. Thesson turned his ancient eyes on the ambassador. What do you mean? The humans are different from other species we have encountered, Urelketh said. When we give them a problem, they do not accept it as impossible. They work around it. They build new solutions. They refuse to surrender to circumstances. That is their weakness. They do not know when to submit. Or perhaps it is their strength. The High Arbiter dismissed Urelketh with a wave of his arm, but the ambassador's words lingered in the air. As months passed, the situation grew worse for the council. Human ships were everywhere now, trading freely, making contacts, building relationships. Species that had never questioned the council began to watch the humans with interest. 3 council species quietly opened secret communication channels with Earth. They wanted to know more about this fold space technology. They wanted to know how humanity had built it. They wanted to know if there was room for them in whatever the humans were creating. 2 years after the blockade began, 7 species had established unofficial ties with humanity. Some of them were powerful members of the council. Some had been talking about leaving for centuries. The Concord's monopoly on interstellar commerce was cracking. Its control over information was failing. And somewhere in the depths of Nexus Prime, the Council of Elders realized that isolation had not broken humanity. It had set them free. Elder Keth spoke in a council session, his ancient voice heavy with worry. The blockade has failed. The humans grow stronger while we grow weaker. We must try a different approach. But High Arbiter Thesson was not ready to accept defeat. His pride would not allow it. These humans were children, barely out of their cradles, and they dared to defy the most powerful organization in galactic history. If isolation will not work, he said, then we must take direct action. The humans have a colony called New Carthage on the edge of their territory. It is small and exposed. We will send a fleet to remind them of their vulnerability. Elder Keth's fur turned gray with concern. This is dangerous. If we attack and fail, other species will see our weakness. We will not fail, Thesson replied. We will show the galaxy what happens to those who reject the council. Orders were given. 3 battle fleets assembled. 200 warships prepared to bring humanity to its knees. They did not know that the humans were waiting for them. They did not know that everything was about to change. Admiral Tethral of the Morathi Third Fleet stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Judgment. Behind him, 200 warships stretched across space like a wall of steel and fire. The combined firepower of 3 fleets could crack a planet's crust. It could turn moons to dust. It could end civilizations. Today, It would teach humanity a lesson. The colony of New Carthage hung in space ahead of them. It was a small world, green and blue, orbited by mining stations and cargo platforms. According to Council intelligence, it was home to 2 million humans. It was poorly defended. It was the perfect target. "All ships report ready," his tactical officer announced. "We can begin the operation on your command." Tethral's scales rippled with satisfaction. The High Arbiter had given him clear instructions. They were not to destroy the colony. They were to demonstrate Council power. Disable the defense platforms, land troops on the surface. Take control of the government buildings. The humans would surrender, and the galaxy would see that resistance to the Council was futile. "Begin approach," Tethral commanded. The fleet moved forward. Long-range sensors swept the colony, gathering data on defense positions and civilian structures. Everything matched the intelligence reports. The humans had only a handful of military vessels, small patrol ships that were no threat to a proper fleet. Then the sensors picked up something strange. "Admiral," the tactical officer said, confusion in his voice, "the surface populations are moving." "Moving where?" "Everywhere. Ground vehicles are evacuating cities. Shuttles are launching from every platform. They are leaving the colony." Tethral felt the first touch of unease. Why would they run? The Council fleet had not even announced itself yet. How did they know? "Continue approach," he ordered. "They cannot escape. Our ships are faster." But as the fleet drew closer, the evacuation accelerated. Thousands of shuttles rose from the surface like a swarm of insects. Cargo ships detached from orbital stations and folded space, vanishing in flashes of light. Within an hour, the colony was empty. 2 million humans had disappeared. Tethral stared at the abandoned world on his screen. His scales had turned pale with confusion. "How was this possible?" he whispered. "How did they know we were coming?" The answer came a moment later, when 40 human warships appeared around his fleet. They folded into existence without warning, emerging from nothing in a perfect sphere around the Council forces. They were smaller than Marathi vessels, built for speed rather than size. Their hulls were dark gray, marked with names that Tethral could not read. The lead ship broadcast a message to all channels. "Council fleet, this is Admiral Sarah Okafor of the Earth Defense Force. You have entered human territory without permission. Your presence here is an act of war. You will power down your weapons and surrender your vessels, or we will disable you. This is your only warning." For a moment, Tethral simply stared at the screen. Then he laughed. 40 ships against 200? These humans are insane. He turned to his tactical officer. "All ships, weapons free. Destroy them." 200 Council warships opened fire. Space lit up with energy beams and missile trails. The combined firepower of 3 fleets poured toward the human vessels. It was enough to destroy a small moon. The human ships were not there. They folded space at the last instant, vanishing and reappearing in new positions. The Council weapons struck empty void. Before Tethral could issue new orders, the humans attacked. Their weapons were different from anything he had seen. Thin beams of focused energy that cut through armor like water. Missiles that folded space and appeared inside shield perimeters. Electronic attacks that scrambled targeting systems and communication networks. In 3 minutes, 12 Council ships lost power. Their engines died. Their weapons went offline. They drifted helplessly in the dark. The human ships moved like dancers, weaving between the larger Council vessels, striking and vanishing and striking again. They targeted specific systems with surgical precision. Engines, weapons, communications, shield generators. They never fired at crew quarters. They never targeted life support. Tethral watched his fleet fall apart around him. Ships he had commanded for centuries went dark one by one. His tactical displays filled with error messages and damage reports. "Admiral," his officer shouted, "the Eternal Judgment's engines are failing. We cannot maneuver." "Impossible," Tethral hissed. "We are the most advanced fleet in the galaxy." But the humans had not read that report. The battle lasted 47 minutes. When it ended, 3 council fleets drifted powerless in space. Not a single ship had been destroyed, not a single crew member had been killed, but 200 warships had been reduced to floating metal boxes, unable to fight, unable to flee. Admiral Okafor's voice came through the communication system again. "Council fleet, your ships have been disabled. Rescue vessels are being dispatched to collect your crews. You will be returned to Council space unharmed." There was a pause. "Tell your High Arbiter this message from humanity. We do not want war, but we will not be colonized. Not by guns, not by treaties, not by you. If you come for us again, the next battle will not be so gentle." The human ships folded space and vanished, leaving the crippled fleet alone in the silence of space. On Nexus Prime, the news arrived like a thunderbolt. 3 fleets, 200 ships, defeated by 40 human vessels without losing a single human life. It was impossible. It was humiliating. It was a disaster. But the greater disaster came in the weeks that followed. Species throughout the galaxy had watched the battle. They had seen the mighty council brought low by a young species that refused to submit. They had seen that the council could be defeated. And they had seen that the humans had shown mercy. 12 species formally withdrew from the Concord within the month. They sent messages to Earth, asking for dialogue. They wanted to know if there was another way. They wanted to know if they too could be free. High Arbiter Thesson raged in his chambers, but there was nothing he could do. The fracture had become a schism. The galaxy was changing. And at the center of that change stood humanity, small and young and impossibly stubborn. They had refused to bow. They had refused to break, and now others were following their example. Yirlketh stood in his quarters, watching the news reports scroll across his screen. He had served the Council for 600 years. He had believed in its mission. He had helped dozens of species find their place in the Great Order. Now that order was crumbling, and somehow, despite everything, he felt something he had not felt in centuries. 5 years had passed since the day humanity said no. The station called Horizon floated in neutral space, far from any planet or star. It was a human design, built in the months after the Battle of New Carthage. Its shape was unusual, a great ring that spun slowly in the void, creating gravity through motion. Lights glittered along its surface like stars brought to life. Today, 43 species had gathered inside its walls. Secretary-General Amara Okonkwo walked through corridors filled with beings she had never imagined meeting. The tall Thessari with their stone-like skin. The furry Kalashi, who had once served the Council faithfully. The strange Drexi, who spoke through scent. And dozens of others, species large and small, ancient and young, all of them here for the same reason. They had come to talk. The main assembly chamber was different from the great chamber on Nexus Prime. There were no high seats or raised platforms. No one looked down on anyone else. The delegates sat in circles, facing each other as equals. Sunlight poured through transparent walls, showing the endless stars beyond. Okonkwo took her place at a simple podium at the center of the room. She was older now, her hair completely gray, her face lined with the weight of the years, but her eyes were still sharp, and her voice was still strong. 5 years ago, humanity received an offer, she began. The Galactic Council promised us technology, trade, and protection. In exchange, we would sign a treaty that had governed this galaxy for 3,000 years. We would become part of their system. We would take our place in their order. She paused, looking around the room at the faces watching her. We said no. Not because we did not want peace, not because we did not want friendship, but because the treaty they offered was not an agreement between equals, and humanity does not surrender. A murmur ran through the assembly. Some of the delegates had heard this story before. Others were learning it for the first time, but all of them listened. We expected the council to accept our decision. They did not. They tried to isolate us. When that failed, they tried to intimidate us. When that failed too, they sent warships to show us our place. Okonkwo shook her head slowly. They thought we were weak because we were young. They thought we would break because we were small. They were wrong. She activated a holographic display that showed images from the past 5 years. Human ships traveling freely through space. Meetings with species that had left the council. New trade routes forming across the galaxy. We survived because we found our own way. We built our own technology. We made our own friends. And we learned something important. We learned that we are not alone in wanting something better. In the gallery above the main floor, Yerelketh watched the speech in silence. He was no longer an ambassador. The Thessary government had stripped him of his position after he publicly questioned the council's actions. Now he was simply a private citizen, an observer of history. But he was here. That meant something. Okonkwo continued. Many of you came to us in secret at first. You were afraid of what the council might do if they discovered you were talking to humans. But you came anyway. You asked questions. You shared your own stories. And we learned that the council had done to you what they tried to do to us. She looked at the Kalashi delegation. Their leader, a young female with bright orange fur, nodded slowly. We learned that the dream of freedom is not unique to humanity. Every species in this room has felt it. Every species in this room has wanted more than the council allowed. The only difference is that we were too stubborn to stay quiet about it. Soft laughter rippled through the assembly. So today, we are here to build something new, Okonkwo said. Not another council. Not another system where the strong rule the weak and call it harmony. We are here to create a true confederation, a partnership of equals, a place where species can work together without losing themselves. She activated another display. This one showed a document, simple and short. This is the Horizon Charter. I will read its core principles. 1. Every member species retains complete sovereignty over its own territory and internal affairs. 2. No species may be forced to change its culture, language, or traditions. 3. Disputes between members will be resolved by mutual agreement, not by judges appointed by the powerful. 4. Membership is voluntary and can be ended at any time. 5. We defend each other against external threats, but we do not use force against each other. She let the words hang in the air. That is all. There are no hidden clauses, no fine print, no tricks. Just 5 simple rules that every species in this room helped to write. A delegate from the Drexy released a scent that filled the room with the smell of fresh rain. It meant approval. The Galactic Council still exists, Okonkwo acknowledged. They are not happy with what we are building here. They will try to stop us. They will call us rebels and troublemakers and threats to galactic peace. They will say that our confederation cannot work, that species cannot cooperate without strong central control. Her voice hardened. They are wrong. We have already proven that. 43 species are in this room today. We have traded with each other. We have shared knowledge with each other. We have helped each other through crises. And we have done it without absorbing anyone, without erasing anyone, without making anyone less than they were. She stepped back from the podium. Humanity did not come to the stars to conquer. We came to explore, to learn, to meet others who share our curiosity about the universe. We found the council and saw a system that crushed that curiosity. So we built something else, something better. and now we invite all of you to build it with us." Okonkwo raised her hand toward the watching delegates. "Today, we sign the Horizon Charter. Today, the Confederation of Free Species is born. Not because humans made it happen, but because all of us, together, chose freedom." The chamber erupted in sound, calls of approval in 100 languages, colors shifting on the bodies of species that communicated through light, scents released by those who spoke through chemistry. It was chaos, beautiful chaos, the noise of free beings celebrating their choice. In the gallery, Yirelketh watched with eyes that glistened with unexpected emotion. He had served the Council for 600 years. He had believed in its mission, and now he saw that mission had been a lie, a comfortable lie that he had told himself to avoid facing the truth. The truth was simple. The Council had been a cage, a pretty cage, decorated with the promise of safety, but a cage nonetheless. And now the door was open. One by one, the delegates came forward to sign the charter. Clawed hands and tentacles and appendages of every shape made their marks. When it was done, 43 species stood united in something new. Secretary General Okonkwo made her way to the gallery after the ceremony. She found Yirelketh standing alone by a window, looking out at the stars. "You could join us," she said, "the Fasari who disagree with the Council. There are more of you than you think." Yirelketh smiled, an expression he had learned from watching humans. "Perhaps I will, in time. For now, I am content to watch, to see what you build." "And what do you think we will build?" He considered the question for a long moment. "The Council's greatest mistake," he said finally, "was assuming that humanity wanted what everyone else wanted. Safety, certainty, a place in an established order." He turned to face her. "They never considered that you might want something more." Okonkwo nodded. "We wanted to be ourselves. That's all." "That is everything," Yirelketh replied. "And now you have shown others that they can want it too. The galaxy will never be the same." Outside the window, a human ship folded space and vanished in a flash of light. It was heading somewhere new, somewhere unexplored, somewhere full of possibility. Amara Okonkwo watched it go and smiled. Freedom, she thought, was contagious, and it was spreading across the stars.